Hello everybody and welcome to another one of my videos. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They still haven't announced a release date or anything for it, so who knows when the game's coming out. But not too long ago, actually I don't remember when exactly it was, but they made an announcement talking about the combat system that's going to be in the game, and this is something that I really wanted to talk about because it's something I'm a little bit conflicted about. I feel like a lot of videos I make on this channel are kind of pessimistic, but I am pessimistic again on this one because they said that the Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to be action-oriented. And so it's going to be a little more similar to games like Final Fantasy XV, or if you play Type 0 HD, it's going to be more like those games. And a little bit less like the original Final Fantasy VII, which, if you knew, is sort of that active time battle combat system, which I'll explain what all that is in a moment. I'm a little bit conflicted, like I said, though. I really liked the old style of the game, and even the traditional turn-based. If you've played the original Final Fantasies, or even if you played games like Pokemon, you know what traditional turn-based is like, and I always liked that style. And I get why they're moving forward. A part of me feels like they're doing it because that's kind of the direction that games as a whole are going. If you think of all the popular games out there, you know, like Kingdom Hearts is one of their popular franchises, but even when you just think of like first-person shooter games, or the way Legend of Zelda is, there's not many turn-based combat games that are popular anymore. I mean, we used to have Paper Mario, for example, was a really popular one. But even lately today, if you look at the last two games like Color Splash and Sticker Star, they didn't exactly get good reviews. So, I don't know. I feel like turn-based combat hasn't been getting great reviews in games lately. I feel like it hasn't been as popular anymore. I don't know if that's why Final Fantasy started turning away from it or not, but it's kind of disappointing to me. But so I kind of wanted to use this video to sort of talk about the different combat styles that were in Final Fantasy, and then sort of try to determine which one is the best. I have my opinion on which one is the best, but I wanted to talk about them all. And so if you haven't played Final Fantasy before, I'll give you a brief overview. There's three main combat systems that have been in the Final Fantasy games, and we'll call them, there's a bunch more that kind of get more specific, but the three main categories that I'll go by is traditional turn-based, is active time battle, and then is real-time battle. So those are sort of the three main, and then within those there are like subcategories. With traditional turn-based, there's conditional turn-based, which is what Final Fantasy X was. I know that active time battle had the command synergy phase that Final Fantasy XIII had. Just a lot of words, basically. I feel like they just gave names to stuff that they wanted to give names to. But we're not going to focus on the super specific details because they don't change that much. I really just wanted to focus on the three main categories that I listed. And so the games that fall into each category, so the traditional turn-based, there weren't many games like this. And I think this is what's interesting, is a lot of people would say, well, I'm kind of glad they're not doing turn-based, because turn-based is boring. But the reality is, Final Fantasy has never really been a turn-based franchise anyway. The only games that have really had actual true turn-based are the original, the second one, the third one, and then Final Fantasy X. And even Final Fantasy X is the one that's conditional, which essentially just means you don't exactly take turns. Like in that game, if you used a haste spell on yourself, you might get 2 turns in a row. That's all that means. But for the most part, it's basically traditional, so we'll lump it in with the rest of those. But there really weren't many games that fall under that category. So when you think of like the Pokemon style of like just sitting there doing nothing and you can take as long as you want to take a turn, that's not really what Final Fantasy is. So let's just make that clear right off the bat. That Final Fantasy VII, if you've never actually played the original game, it's not a turn-based combat game. At least not the traditional turn-based that you're probably expecting it to be. And then the other style of Final Fantasy game, we're going to skip active time battle for now because I want to save that for the end. But the other style that we already kind of mentioned is the real-time battle. And this consists of games like 15, Type 0, and then this is also the MMO games. So we have 11 and then we have 14. So those are sort of the 4 main ones that fall into that category, outside of like a couple of the spin-off type games. But so those 4 had more of a real-time battle system. And then 12 kind of falls in the middle, I guess, of active time and real time. So I don't want to talk about 12. It had an active dimension battle system where you engage enemies sort of just on the field. You don't go into a separate screen, but it's kind of more active battle. That one gets confusing, so we're just going to leave that one off. But the ones that do have real time, it's essentially just like a normal, almost like Legend of Zelda in a way, or like Kingdom Hearts, where you just sort of engage enemies on a battlefield. And then you have your attack buttons, you have your magic spells, things like that. And so those ones are pretty drastically different. So when you compare those ones to the traditional ones that we talked about, yeah, they're pretty different, right? And it's not just because the traditional ones are older, it's because they play completely differently. So these are all rather new ones. And 11 I barely count because it's an MMO game, and so you can't really do turn-based in an MMO game. So really, the only ones that were like that were 14, Type 0, and 15, which all came out rather recently. In fact, all of these games are out on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, which tells you how new they are. So this real-time combat thing is kind of a new trend for Final Fantasy. So even that's not really what Final Fantasy is, even though a lot of newcomers to the franchise might think it is. So it's not real-time, and we already decided it's not traditional because they changed away from traditional early on. So what is it? Well, the answer is active time. And if you don't know what active time is, that means you probably haven't played the middle ones, because this consists of pretty much all the other games. Some examples of it are Final Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VII, X-2 had it, XIII had it, XIII-2 had it. So the vast majority of games had active time battle. And I think for the most part you could throw 12 in there as well. So 12 I think is more that than real-time battle. Again, it's just words, right? We don't need to get twisted on the words. And so what exactly is active time battle? I feel like I'm giving a lecture right now. I'm like taking notes on a notepad. So active time battle, I'll try to make it brief so we can get to the opinion side of this. But it's essentially a form of turn-based where you take your turn once a timer fills up. And so in these types of games, you can see on the screen I'm showing X-2 here, you have a little bar in the bottom right corner, and as soon as that bar fills up, you do your attack. And then once you do your attack, you have to wait for the bar to fill up again. So it's kind of like the timed version of turn-based combat, where you take turns, but you can't take as long as you want on your turn. The enemy will take their turn as soon as their bar fills up. Meaning if you put the controller down to do nothing, the enemy will get 100 turns in a row, right? Because all they have to do is wait for the bar to fill up to make their next move. And so it's a strategizing game where you have to like think on your feet. Because you have a time limit where you can like scroll through the menu and figure out your attack, but you don't want to take too long because you want to get your combos off. And so that's kind of how active time battle works. And there's a whole lot of other things to it. Each game is different. As I mentioned, Final Fantasy XIII is the command synergy, so they have a lot of differences as far as like you can input multiple commands at the same time, and the bar is different. But again, that doesn't matter. And the important thing to mention though is that 7 falls into this category. And so if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII before and you're like, I don't want to do stupid turn-based combat, so I'm glad it's real-time, I would like to point out the original Final Fantasy VII was not a real-time or a traditional turn-based. It was actually something kind of in the middle. And personally, in my opinion, active time battle was the best one. Because like I said, active time battle, it's a sort of mode where you have to strategize in a time limit. Because I kind of understand why some people don't like turn-based. And it's kind of the same reason that I don't get me wrong, I love Pokemon games and I love Paper Mario, but they were kind of easy. And they were easy because not only were they just easy because they were, but you get as much time as you want to strategize, right? You can sit in the menu, figure out which attack you want to do. You can look at the enemy, figure out like what their weaknesses are rather easily. In a game with active time battle, you can't do that as much. You have some time to strategize, but it really forces you to think quickly. So you can think, but you have to think fast. And so it keeps you engaged, it keeps you enveloped in the battle. You have to be focused, you have to be watchful of the time. It makes it a lot more exciting, I think. What really confuses me about everything, I think, is how they're going to mix active time battle with real-time battle. Because the quote that they made specifically, I don't have the exact quote, but I sort of have it paraphrased, is that they said it was going to be an action real-time combat game, but it was going to have some remnants of active time battle, which I don't understand how that would be possible unless it was more like Final Fantasy XII, where you engage enemies on the field and then there's sort of a time thing. I don't know. I don't know how that even makes sense. They did say that the combat will be slightly slower than what you see in a game like Kingdom Hearts. So if you haven't played Kingdom Hearts is kind of a real-time battle game too. I don't see how Kingdom Hearts is a slow game anyway. I don't know what it means when you say it's slower than Kingdom Hearts, because I thought Kingdom Hearts was faster than Final Fantasy XV. So I don't know exactly what that quote means, but that's kind of the reason that I'm a little bit disappointed that they focused on the real-time battle system so much. And like I said, the games that have it were all the new ones, and so part of me is kind of concerned that this is the route they were going to go down. And it makes me sad because when I think of Final Fantasy, I think of active time battle. I think of games like 7, 8, 9. I think of 10, 2. I think of 13, right? And I mean, the other games around it are really good, don't get me wrong. Like Final Fantasy X is my favorite. But active time battle, I thought, was what made Final Fantasy Final Fantasy. Because imagine a situation where Pokemon, which for the most part is a traditional turn-based game, all of a sudden made a new game that was real-time, right? Like, let's pretend that Pokemon Sun and Moon, instead of being turn-based, was basically what Pokken is, where you just fight enemies. People would hate that. People would complain and be like, this is not Pokemon, this is something different. This is a real-time game. So that's the idea behind that. But with Final Fantasy, I feel like Final Fantasy gets a pass because it keeps changing. Final Fantasy is like a bunny rabbit on like meth or something, because it can't commit to one thing. It keeps switching back and forth between the 3 styles. And I was hoping that it would maybe go back to the active time battle system, because the real-time battle system on its own, I didn't even like it that much, I thought. In Final Fantasy 15, you kind of just press a button, and then you sit there, and then he attacks automatically. Like, you just press B, and then he does his attacks automatically. You press other buttons, obviously, to do other, like, mechanics if you want to use magic or different weapons and stuff, but it's not, like, that engaging. Like, even with the real-time, I thought Type 0 did it pretty well, where at least you can switch between characters who have different weapons, and a lot of enemies you kind of need to use magic on. Like, in Final Fantasy 15, there wasn't a lot of that. You didn't need to strategize in 15. Attack, and then when your health goes down, just heal. And that's pretty much it. And that was kind of disappointing. And I feel like that really takes away from what Final Fantasy VII was and all the other games were, because in those ones you had to strategize and actually use your magic accordingly, and the timer sort of stressed you out because it's like, should I heal or should I attack? And I don't have a lot of time to decide. So it was a better style, I thought, and it's kind of unfortunate that that's not the style they're using in the game. I'm gonna put faith in them. I liked Final Fantasy 15. The combat system was iffy, but the story in it was fine. I don't know. Final Fantasy VII has a great story, we know that. I'm curious how it's gonna work. If they find a way to actually integrate active time battle into a real-time battle situation, I would be very impressed. Because I made a video on this, but I don't even know how that would be possible. But if they do it, they do it. But the main thing, I just want it to be good, man. I mean, look at the graphics on this game. The graphics look awesome. The story's going to be awesome. If you've played the original, I won't spoil it if you haven't. The story in it is amazing. It's one of my favorites as far as story goes. I just hope the combat's good. I think that's it. I wished it was active time battle, and I'm hoping whenever Final Fantasy 16 comes out, I'm hoping maybe they'll go back, but odds are they won't. I feel like at this point they're probably going to be sticking to real-time battle. But whatever. I'm a sucker. I've played pretty much every single Final Fantasy game, so I'm not going to stop if it's real-time. So with that being said, let me know what you thought of this video in the description below, and let me know what kind of style you like. Whether you're a traditional type person like a Pokemon game, your active time battle like the original Final Fantasy VII, or if you're more of a real-time battle person like Final Fantasy 15 was. Because I'm curious. I'm kind of curious if you guys are excited that it's sort of an action-based real-time battle, or if you guys are kind of like me where you wished it was more of the older style. I don't know if I'm alone in this or not, because I have a couple friends that like the fact that it's action, but they've also never played a Final Fantasy before the 15. So I'm thinking maybe that's what it is. Like, newcomers to the series want action, and I feel like maybe old-time players of Final Fantasy prefer the older style. I don't know. So let me know your opinions on this below, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.